Welcome to Between the Lines, a podcast hosted by former world number one Laura Massaro and performance coach Ahad Reza.
We break down what's really happening in high-level squash across the technical, tactical, physical and mental realms and help you translate it into action.
You will hear match analysis, guided insights, coaching demonstrations and conversations with some of the best minds in sport.
But this isn't just about the theory. It's about growing a community of curious players and coaches dedicated to unlocking their potential together.
So if you're ready to train smarter, think deeper, and play better, join us Between the Lines. Folks, we just wrapped up a fantastic conversation with Sarah Fitz-Gerald, former world number one, multiple-time world champion. You're going to get to know all about her in a second, but Laura and I wanted to tell you some really fun stuff that we just picked up from the call. For me, it was all about simplicity and how simply she thought about the tactics, how aware she was in the moment, even though it was very instinctual. She spoke about some of the shots that she liked to play and how she broke people down with patterns of play. I think you're going to love it. Laura, what was your big thing?
Yeah, I absolutely love that side of it too. But just hearing her stories, she was always such an amazing person to be around, always treated the promoters, which she talks about really, really well, always spoke to every member at a club that she was at. And I saw that from personal experience. So just her talking about some of her experiences on tour, some stories that maybe people haven't heard before. And it was just really, really insightful, the whole chat. And I loved it.
Especially some of the stories about unintentionally breaking people's spirits before playing them in tournaments. I love it. Well, folks, get ready. We're going to jump in.
Today, we welcome Sarah Fitz-Gerald to the Between the Lines podcast. Sarah is a true legend of our sport. She has 60 professional titles, including 5 World Championship titles and 2 British Open titles. Away from the professional tour, Sarah won a remarkable 6 World Team titles and won a gold, silver and bronze medal at multiple Commonwealth Games. She spent 39 months at world number one and represented Australia 75 times. In 2004, Sarah became a member of the Order of Australia and in 2010 was inducted into the Sport Australia Hall of Fame, both of which these awards truly transcend squash. Sarah's most recent achievement was to be inducted into the PSA Hall of Fame in June this year, 2025. And I was lucky enough to be there. And from here on out, it will be Fitzy, because this is just strange. But welcome, Fitzy, to our little podcast. And we're so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me. And if you called me Sarah, I'd be a bit like, who? Be looking at who are you talking to?
Exactly.
Called me ever since I can remember.
Yeah. So I think a great way to start it off would be just kind of getting your thoughts on all of those amazing achievements that I've just read out, and how does it feel in retirement to kind of listen to that back, and what are you up to now for everybody listening?
Well, it kind of takes you back, and I'm sort of sitting there trying to picture some of those things and those moments. And I think at the time you don't really realize, and it's just as you read them out, it kind of hits home, everything that I did do, I guess, during my career. And then it's the acknowledgement afterwards, because some of those are acknowledgements that you read out as well of, your achievements. And yeah, it's beautiful to be acknowledged for what you did representing your country or just within your sport. And some of those were up against some pretty amazing Australian sports people as well. And, I was given these awards over, I don't mean over, it depends on whether they were called out that year, but, names that like Kathy Freeman and Ian Thorpe and the list goes on. And to be part of that and be part of that group is obviously something very special. And it's because I was doing something I absolutely loved, and that's what makes it even better.
Absolutely. I mean, I was looking at the list of the awards, particularly for the Sport Australia Hall of Fame, and some of the names on there are truly global global sporting athletes, aren't they? Of particularly big sports in Australia like swimming and athletics and netball, I guess, things like that are really truly Commonwealth sports. So yeah, such an achievement. And what are you up to now?
Well, I'm happily retired. Believe it or not, I've left the life of squash, which was when I retired. I was doing some coaching and some traveling and on committees and all sorts. But I've moved out to the country, so I'm about nearly 2 hours north of Melbourne, and I live on 50 acres, and I'm still involved in squash through committees. So I'm on the World Squash Federation's coaching committee. I'm president of Squash Victoria, which also means I have some involvement to a degree with Squash Australia. I'm involved in a club in Melbourne called Kooyong, and so, I'm quite often committed, or I go to the venue and I catch up with people. So I'm still heavily involved. I'm just not physically playing at the moment. I'm a little older now, and my body doesn't love me as much as back in the playing days. So a few things hurt and ache, but also being 2 hours north of Melbourne, there aren't any squash courts that close to me. So it's a lot harder to keep fit and keep playing. And I think you'll begin to appreciate this, Laura, as you sort of get on a little bit as well. But if you have a week off court and then you go have a hit, it hurts a lot, the next hit. And you can imagine living in the country, that's sometimes a month between hits. So it gets harder and harder to keep squash fit, really.
Right. And Fitzy, I had a question. When you were talking about the acknowledgements and the accomplishments, while you were playing, were you being driven by the potential acknowledgements and the trophies and the accolades, or were you be driven purely by the passion of the game, like you mentioned?
Absolutely, the passion of the game. For me, in my day, the British Open was the absolute ultimate. And I remember one year, I can't tell you what year, I don't remember the time frame, but at one stage, the British Open was having a bit of sponsorship issues. It wasn't going to be as big a tournament as it deserved to be. And a lot of the players were like, well, we're not going to play. I'm like, I don't care. I will play this event, even if it had no sponsorship at all, because that was the title that meant something to me. And when you look back at that trophy, that's Jeff Hunt, Jahangir, Jansha, Heather Mackay, the list goes on. And if I could have my name on that trophy, that was what was important to me. So I think as well, as you're going through and you're slowly getting up to world number one, it's about trying to get to be number one and be the best you can be. And with that comes winning titles. So, and I think I remember Jonah Barrington saying, he would win something and then you'd hit such a high and then the next day you hit such a low because you've worked so hard to get to that. Your adrenaline's up, you finally get it, and then you come down. And the hard part is then the build up again. But it wasn't so much just winning the titles and any of the acknowledgements. That's just the bonus that comes later. It was the sense of achievement and the satisfaction for all the hard work you did. And when you won something, it was, you knew it paid off then. That's what you were working towards. So for me, it was definitely the passion of the game and, being the best you could be. And if a tournament title came with that, that's the bonus.
I love that. Laura, sounds like you want to say something. Jump in.
Was that attitude that you got? Do you think that was something that we've spoken about this on the podcast before a little bit? When you think about the players nowadays, which I guess is a little bit different, the tour's more professional. There's a lot more prize money involved, certainly. And I think about my own playing career, and there was. How much of that attitude was instilled into you from someone when you were quite young? Because we talk about Asal, for example, and we talk about the way that he plays the game, the spirit that he plays the game. And that comes even in Jonah's speech when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, sort of had a bit of a jib at Joel Makin, didn't he? And said, "You won't know anything about the spirit of the game, Joel." And he kind of laughed. I think they they have a relationship, so it was all good. But it was like, it is ultimately the spirit of how you play the game. And I was very much kind of brought up to be win at all costs, I guess, without crossing too many lines and stuff like that. But it was win was number one priority. Enjoyment was lower down the list. So would you say that that ties into your attitude as you know, from your upbringing?
Well, I was always brought up to believe this was my job. And I was very fortunate that squash was my job. And, you know, some people are sitting doing desk work and they hate it. So I got to do something I absolutely loved. So traveling around the world and playing these events was something I absolutely loved doing. So coming back to that, it's about, I loved it. It was the passion about it. The titles were a bonus, but there were some titles that just meant so much more. And because when I grew up, for me, the Victorian, which is where I'm from in Australia, the Australian, the World Open and the British Open were the four that I really always wanted. So that was it for me, and that was instilled in me, I guess, as a kid. You know, my mum was a former player as well, so she won the Victorian and Australian title. So it was just important for me, those events. All the others were an absolute bonus. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely loved them. And there were so many amazing special moments about those events. You know, even what was it? The YMG in Toronto years ago.
Mm.
God, I loved it because I absolutely adore Canada. POC in New York.
Yeah.
That one's grown into a really important title actually over time, but it's taken years. But something like the British, that was already there before I started.
Yeah.
It was just, and you know what, a World Open, it doesn't matter what country in the world that thing's played, that title means something, because it doesn't matter whether you're talking marbles, tiddlywinks, squash, any sport. If you're a world champion, that means something. So it doesn't matter what country or what location it is played. It means something, and that's what you strive to be.
I love that. I think about some of the junior players and the current cultural environment around squash, especially in North America. And there's so much pressure on these kids from a very young age because they're aspiring to go play in college. And then they have all these very high academic pressures to go along with it. And from at least my limited experience or exposure with the number of kids, a lot of them don't necessarily seem to be super passionate about the game. It seems to be a job and a means to an end from a very young age. Do you have thoughts on that approach? Do you think it's curious? Do you think it's a healthy approach? Do you think it's a viable and sustainable approach?
Yeah, look, what goes on in North America took me a long time to get my head around. And when I said before, I was brought up to believe it was a job, but I'm being paid to be an entertainer. It's just my entertainment happens to be squash, happens to be sport. So when I came across kids in North America, certainly I'm talking 20, 30 years ago, I think the attitude's slowly changing a little bit in the US and North America. But, you know, I came across this one kid and he was really talented from a young age. And I said, wow, you know, what is it you think you want to do? Do you want to go on and win the US junior title and stuff? And he goes, oh, I so want to get better just so I can get into college. And I'm like, I was just like this. I mean, what do you mean? You don't even realize, kid, how good you could be. And, you know, that is a North American mindset. It is about going to college or uni or whatever. And I wasn't brought up that way. Squash was the thing to do. And I made that decision at an early age to become a professional player. And, well, probably not that early, but it sort of dawned on me this was going to be my career. And once I'd made that decision, that was what I wanted to do. But back when I grew up, people didn't aspire to go to college. Not in this country. It's a bit more that attitude now. But in North America, that was what they aspired to do, to go to college. And at one stage, squash was, or it is still, an avenue to get to college easier. And so I respect that. And it means there's lots of kids playing, which I really love. And there are a handful that have carried on. Example, the Sobies, and a bunch of others. So it's just a different way of thinking. It wasn't in my world when I grew up, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the way that it's been done now, especially in the States and probably in the UK, is people and players are now realizing actually that they can get a degree. And in Egypt, it's so surprising when you speak to so many of the Egyptian players. They're all have degrees. They all go to university out there. And I think because you see those positive results from the likes of Amanda Sobey, Ali Farag, Victor Crouan, Hania, for example, has done a degree within Egypt. A lot of the Gina Kennedy, then they go on and be top 10 in the world. And in, Ali Farag's case, it's, multiple world champion. It lays a different path, doesn't it? The sport evolves and it lays a different path. But from what you were saying there, I was really interested. So for those who don't know you maybe as well as I do, one thing that always massively kind of, actually, it was an education, I think, being a little bit younger. And I turned pro, didn't I? For those, a little bit of background for those that don't know, you retired right as I was turning pro, maybe a couple of years into my pro career, and you were based in Manchester. And England Squash, for once, did something really good. And when we'll pay you to play all of our junior players or transitioning senior players as much as you want. And I was just on the bandwagon, wasn't I, booking in slots like every week. Can I play you? Can I play you? And so I just, not more than the matches, equal to the matches, was just picking your brain and being around. You came to our club and did an exhibition, and I just used to watch, I think, and in awe of that. That makes so much sense to me, what you said about that entertainment, because that's exactly what I saw. It wasn't just even the entertainment within the squash. It was the conversation with sponsors. You never seemed to forget a name. You always spoke to everyone, whether it was an elderly person at the bar or a kid. And I took so much from my career about just how you should treat people around the sport as well, that I don't know if is almost there quite as much as the sport grows. But was that something, again, that was kind of, I know you touched upon your mum was a player and she was one of your first coaches, right? So was that something that you were around just as a family? Was it a bit of a front, or were you genuinely that friendly all the time? And how did you see it?
It was, well, I'm the youngest of 6 kids. So one thing for sure is if I won something, it was like I was still the youngest in the family, and I still had to do my duty in the house, which was feed the dog or put the plates in the dishwasher or whatever. So, I'd come home and win something, and they're all like, "Oh, well done. All right, back to normal life." That's just how it was. And so my mum very much instilled in me when I was a kid, if I was playing a tournament, and I remember literally being 12 years old, and I'd play this event, and I'd walk outside ready to get in the car to go home. And Mum's like, "Have you thanked the sponsor and the organizer?" And I'm like, well, no. And she says, "Go back inside and go shake their hand." And she would literally come in and stand a few feet behind me and make sure I shook hands with them. And I'd walk straight up, and I'm 12, and I'm going, "Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the tournament, and I hope to be back next year." And, and it was all just this 12-year-old, really shy, Well, I don't know if I've ever been shy particularly, but, and then she would also then make me, back in the day, because there was no emails, I used to have to write a letter and once again say thank you very much, either to the sponsor and the organizer for the event and running it, and to thank all the volunteers and the mums and dads and people that helped. And so that's somewhere along the way that stuff was instilled in me, I guess. And I guess growing up with that, and then in my early days on the tour, I remember being at a particular tournament in Germany, and I got back from Germany, and it was one of those, I flew in, the fellow that picked me up couldn't speak English bar 10 words, and I had even less German. We drove for about an hour to the venue, barely a word being said. I bumped into all the players. I practiced, went home to the hotel. Next day, practiced, played my match, had a win, repeat the next day. Next thing you know, I've been knocked out and I've gone back to the airport. The same fella drove me. And I get back to England, and Mike Walton is his name. He was my manager at the time, and he said, "So did you see, blah, blah?" And I went, "No, I didn't." He goes, "Who was the sponsor?" And I went, I don't know. And he goes, "Did you?" And he asked me a bunch of questions. And in the end, I realized I didn't have one answer for him. And I thought, that is so wrong, that it goes against everything I knew as a kid, which means I turned up, I played an event, I was looked after, I was housed, I was accommodated, I was fed, I played my matches, I got paid to do something I love and perform. And then I flew back and someone drove me to the airport. And I couldn't tell you one thing about the tournament, and I was a bit disgusted in myself.
Yeah.
Then I found out after that, I just ended up then putting my hand up to join on the committee, because I felt, who are these people that do this? Who sponsors the events? Who runs the events? Who volunteers to help out? Why do these people keep turning up and hosting us all around the world? And that's just how I ended up getting involved. So that's where it came from, and it's actually very genuine. And so when I turn up at a club, the members or the people there, they're the lifeblood of that venue. Yeah. So none of us would be here, nor would there be a spectator ever watching any of us if it wasn't for those people.
Yeah.
So we get paid to entertain. We get paid to do a job, and our job is to entertain.
Yeah.
Play to the best of our ability. And obviously, if you don't play well, you don't earn as much. The better you play, the more you put in, the more you make, which is the same in any job. The better you are, the higher up the food chain you go until you run the show, whatever. So it's no different. And I think that's just pretty normal. If people don't see it that way, they've got it wrong. But
yeah, I mean, I agree. Sorry to jump in again. I just feel like I think that actually slowly but surely that's disappearing in this world a little bit, where I see it even obviously having Leo, who's 3 now. It's becoming a little bit of a fight for him to not start to be the center of our family world. And I guess that's easier when there's 6 of you. But Danny talks to me about it a lot as a parent. And then obviously if you get into sport, how Saturdays used to be the fun day, and Sundays you got in the car, you did as you told, and you went to your grandparents and you watched Antiques Roadshow and you sat there and you didn't talk. And it was like, that was the way of the world. And now it's almost like these youngsters are becoming the center of their own universe. And so without realizing it, you don't understand what's going on around you because no one's educating you of that. And I think the biggest eye-opener for me, what you're describing there, was actually running my own PSA event about 10 years ago with my brother. We put a 15K on at my club. And I was running it I didn't play in it, but I was probably about 3 in the world at the time. So everybody knew who I was. I was running the event, and I couldn't believe the amount of people clicking their fingers at me, even with who I was in the tour at the time. So I thought, God help these promoters who are actually, thinking that these people are talking to me actually with probably a bit more respect and kind of manners than maybe they would have done had it just been a normal promoter. And it was so eye-opening for me actually to then go and play another 10 years on tour, or maybe another 6 years on tour, having run that event, and how I then treated the promoters and the little details that they went to make me feel at home. So I love that. And I think would you agree that's actually a really important point for juniors listening and amateurs that might play kind of those graded events too?
100%.
Yeah.
Those people don't have to help you if they don't want to, if you know what I mean, or they don't have to try so hard.
Yeah.
Well, it's really easy to take things for granted, right? Like Laura, like you said, when you are actually on the back end and you're on the receiving end, your perspective completely shifts. So I think for people listening, especially competitive players now, there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes that you just don't understand, and the amount of stress and energy and effort and thoughtfulness that goes into it, that the least we can do is appreciate and be grateful for everything we're given. And if things aren't up to par for our expectations, we still need to be grateful because they did the best that they were capable of in that moment to provide everything that they possibly could. So I think just that mindset of humility and appreciation, I think, is extremely important for all of us, on and off the court for that matter.
Yeah. And those people running it, I mean, if they're not the CEO or general manager or whatever, they're probably not doing it as a volunteer. So they're not earning anything. So to cop any crap from any player is, that's a lot, takes a lot. And, the lead up for those 4 days of that event is months of work to go into that on their own time. And that's where people need to remember that.
Yeah, I agree. I know Laura, Laura was mentioning to me that, Fitzy, you had, Mike Johnson, Mike Way, your mom, Roger Flynn, bunch of coaches throughout your career. Just curious, how did those coaches shape you? And kind of, was there any particular thing you learned from each one of them? We've obviously spoken a bit about your mom, but how about the other coaches? Was there almost like one thing that you took from each of them, or any key life lessons, key squash lessons?
Oh, pretty much. They all put something important into me or my game. So my mum, obviously, it was the beginning. So technically, she taught me, and I guess instilled my love. And she used to have a map of the world on the kitchen wall, and she very much talked about how she loved traveling to England and doing this in Europe and playing squash here, there, and everywhere. So right from a young age, I probably knew I was I wanted to travel. So, I'd look at that map all the time and wonder where in the world I'd get to go. So it was, she very much put that part into me. So along the way, there's a whole bunch of coaches in there that did bits and pieces, names you won't know, but Bruce Alexander, who's the father of Zach Alexander, who's been a PSA player. Brucey helped me a lot in my early days. My mum could get me so far. She knew she needed other voices, and Bruce was very helpful in my early days of just helping me understand good length on a squash court and just angles in the back corners. He really got me working with that. Mike Johnson, when I came to England, spent 12 years at the club at Caversham in Reading. There was a bunch of Aussies based there, but Mike was a lot of fitness, hard work. He was awesome for that. Along the way, I got to work with Mike Way, who helped me really figure out some of my short game drop shots, because I didn't really have a drop shot until Mike Way really worked with me on that one. I got to work with Malcolm Wilstrop as well. So he got me working on a bit of just change of pace, I think. And like what was so amazing was just a different area to train, which was I went to Pontefract and I got to train with Lee Beechell and James Wilstrop and all the Ponty crew. And it was just a beautiful atmosphere there and absolutely loved it. But Malcolm helped me with, I guess, subtlety of pace and change. Jonah Barrington, oh my God, he put the passion back into me. I lost it for a while and he brought that out. And he's amazing. I have no other words for that than his passion is absolutely amazing. And I went down to Somerset to visit him. And when I got back, people at the club noticed I was different. So within the space of, I went, say, on a Wednesday, and the next day when they saw me on the Thursday, I was different. And that was what Jonah did for me, and he brought that back. But along the way, there were other coaches like Roger Flynn. So, we would talk about angles and I was never very good at delay and shots like that in my game, but we certainly talked about it and he would use bit of trickery. That's what Roger was amazing for. And he really believed in my boast. And I think I used my boast effectively and we worked on that one. Another coach was Gary McIntosh back in the VIS days, Victorian Institute of Sport. And that was just someone who was there for me all the time, whenever I needed just workout training. There were so many people that put different things into my game. So I think I've pretty well named most of them then.
Yeah. So for those people listening who haven't seen you play as much, I think that you are most known for your volleying around the middle of the court. If it was there to be volleyed, it was volleyed. There was never any of that kind of just letting it go past the racket. And I think, well, the one shot that I still to this day don't really know how you play it was the kill on both sides where it can bounce twice before the tee line. I think you could even do it 3 times. Like, I don't even know how, on a high tin, by the way, guys, like this is 19-inch tin. How do you flatten that ball off? So who was it that introduced volleying to you? Were you just good at volleying and you realized you were good at it and did more of it? Or did someone put that into your game? How did that come about?
Well, I do know from a really young age, I did different sports, and squash just fascinated me instantly. And I think it was rain, hail or shine, you could play. I think it was the speed of it and all the angles. And I loved playing, even as a kid, I loved playing against the boys because it was always fast, furious, and, you know, no, what's that word? No holes barred. It was just go for it. Yeah. And I would play full power, full pace the whole time. And I knew one way to speed up the game always was with the volley, and something about it was a natural instinct for me. Just like the Egyptians have this natural instinct to play the volley nick or play drop shots from all over the place. They weren't natural for me. I would rather have hit the ball like low and hard and pace and attack. That was me, but the attack didn't need to be volley drops and volley kills, unlike, you know, how the Egyptians do it. And I would rather win the point rather than risk losing hitting a volley nick into the tin. So I just had an old school way of thinking, but the volley was so natural for me. If ever I was getting behind in a game or losing or whatever, the first thing anyone was saying to me was pick up your volley. And I knew then just to step further forward on the tee and volley when I could. And that shot you were talking about, Laura, is no one taught it to me. It actually somehow, I know I played on instinct. I was instinctive. I didn't really work with a lot of tactics. My instinct would kick in. I had quite a strong awareness of the feel of where my opponent was on the court. And for instance, for argument's sake, you and I'd be playing, and if I did that shot, I could probably feel you were walking back off your serve or something like that. And it just became this instinct for me where I knew to hit it low and hard, because the power in my swing would give you the body language of I'm going to hit to length, and you'd probably lean back. But this thing ended up so hard, so short at the front, it was really hard. You'd fall back and you can't get forward. And I must have done it somewhere a few times and it's suddenly stuck. Well, that's a good shot. I've just got to pick the right times to keep playing it. And you know, I think it just became a bit of a trademark shot.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely attest to the fact that, you know, you said yourself you were mainly to the back volleying, and you would just sort of get this feeling of getting pummeled further back in the court to the point where you almost felt like, well, I don't really have to push up to the tee because she's not going to drop shot. And then this kill would come in and you're like, well, that basically became a drop shot because it was so short and you were so far back in the court with this pummeling of length and volley and length and volley. And then it just didn't actually have to be that short to be a winner. It was very annoying. And then when the drop shot did go in, you felt like an absolute numpty because you were literally stood on the back door waiting for the ball to come back to you. So,
well, and this is my old school tactics, which to this day I still believe work, is I would just pound the back corners, and eventually my opponent is either desperate to get out of that corner or have to lift it to get out of that corner, and then I'd get onto it, the next one with the volley or volley boast or volley kill, whatever. And so those simple tactics worked.
Yeah. Well, was there a story actually that I've just remembered there about actually helping Nicole with that? a little bit when she first started on tour? I've just,
Yeah.
sorry, I jumped in again,
This
but
is
all
awesome.
these stories keep
Keep
coming back
going.
to me.
Yeah, it was just trying to think. It was World Team Event somewhere, and I can't remember where the somewhere was. I think it was Sheffield, actually, and I had to play Nicole. And it was one of the first times I was going to be playing her when she wasn't a kid anymore. She was starting to really push up the rankings. And we've warmed up, and we are about 2 rallies in, and I've hit another shot that I ended up using really well was this sort of slow what I call a 3/4 pace cross court. And it was sort of slightly out of volley reach, wide enough it would hit the side wall, but not come off the back wall. And there was there's 2 rallies in, and we're in a situation where I hit something like that and she let it go. And somewhere in the same rally, something else happened and she let it go. And I went, gotcha. I know how to beat you. And we are 2 rallies in. I knew the kid couldn't volley or wouldn't volley. And I just, I worked it out and I beat her 3-love comfortably. And she obviously went on from there. Then later on, when I'd retired and she's working with Liz Irving, Liz said, Fitz, I need to send Nicole to you because you've got to work on a few things, and one of them's her volley. And I'm like, oh, I know. She needs volley. Because she was so fast and she relied on her speed, but not using skill in any way or squash nous, I guess. And so she'd come down to Australia and we'd just spend weeks, and the whole thing was volleys. I said, mate, you got to volley everything. I said, stop using your speed as your strength. Start using other shots. So we spent a lot of time volleying, and then it was so interesting as she got better at it, because she used to move, and we'd be circling down, say, the backhand wall, and when I hit a weak shot, she'd still come round the back of me and then come round the front. And I was getting her to really start pushing up and start cutting in front of me better to volley, or she would pass behind me to go get the ball. I'm like, Nicole, stop it. Push in front of me. So I used to we'd be playing and I'd stop mid-rally when I've caught her out on it. I'm like, stop, figure it out. And that's how we'd train. I used to have to push her to get in front of me, because the other thing is, we all know, she's so bloody polite and so nice. But she used to have to learn how to get harder. And I think
I used to try and kind of play on that a little bit, because she was very, very nice and I could be quite nasty and hard. So
yeah, but it's about, well, as you say, it's about winning. But she was too nice and polite. She'd let you push in front of her and lose rallies or put herself in a bad position. It's like, Nicole, you can smile all you like, but you can still push in front of someone. So she had to learn how to do that.
I love that. And I think, Laura, you recently were mentioning a story about Nicole as well, where what did you either spoke back or something? You spoke to her and then she almost went into a bit of a shell, I think you said, right?
Yeah, it was at a time where I was maybe just starting to get to the point where I could beat her, because thanks to Fitzy, she clearly took on that volley and then went on a 9-year run where no one could beat her. But as I started to get a little bit closer to beating her, I think Danny and the psychologist I was working with said part of trying to beat Nicole is trying to get into her personality. You're not going to beat her if it's just nice. She's too physical, blah, blah. So it was this mindset that I'd gone on with. If there's an opportunity to talk to her, not in a nasty way or anything, but just to kind of break her out of this concentration that she was in. She was very kind of like tunnel vision, just kind of get on with it, never said anything to the ref, never said anything to her opponent. But there was a specific situation where I'd played a backhand drop and she'd said to the ref that I took too much space. And the ref said, "Oh, I didn't see anything wrong with that." And I turned round, and actually it looked a bit more aggressive when I watched the video back that I kind of meant it. I stuck my racket out. I was in the forehand service box. She was probably backhand service box. And I took my racket out and pointed at her and went, "What are you saying about my movement?" And a bit similar to your situation, Fitzy, actually, where she actually stepped back and went, "Nothing. I didn't say anything." And she turned around and I went, "I've got you." Because that's the first time ever that she had submitted to me a little bit. She went submissive to my kind of like front, and I just turned around and kind of remember thinking, she's not going to be able to kind of push me back here. But you had to have that level of physicality. You had to have the squash to back it up. Otherwise, she just kind of wiped you out. I remember some of the players realised that she had to spin the racket. She was really superstitious with spinning the racket. And a couple of us tried to jump in and not let her spin the racket, which became very awkward because it was like a 10 to 15 second standoff of us both stood there with the racket.
Yeah.
And you're thinking in your head, yeah, this is going to throw her so far off, I'm going to beat her. As if you're going to beat her because she's not spun the racket. And obviously you might have won eventually. You spun the racket and she battered you anyway. So you had to have your squash to a good enough level before any of this stuff comes into play, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's a
funny.
question I had.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was watching a video recently about Michael Jordan, and there was some player who Michael Jordan was having an off day, not trying. And then this player started talking smack to Michael Jordan. And as soon as he started talking, it just lit that fire inside of him.
Yeah.
So, and then he came back, and in several minutes of play, he scored 12 points and they just demolished the other team. And then at the end of it, Michael Jordan kind of went to him and said, "Don't ever talk to me like that again. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen," kind of thing. And when I was listening to your spinning the racket story, that could go one of two ways, right? It could go where either Nicole's like, "Oh, this is the game you want to play," even though she's polite, deep down inside, it might have lit a fire in her. He's like, "You're messing with my ritual. I'm going to come and beat you out now."
Exactly.
You never know which way these things are going to unfold. And
well, it was funny actually, because when we're talking about this, I remember a story, Fitzy, about when you were coming back from your knee injury and there was a qualification event. I think it was the Southport Open, correct me if I'm wrong. You were coming back, you were in qualification. I don't know if it was the old peg ranking, and your name got drawn out of the hat, and it was against someone who was clearly top 4 in the qualification, but probably not on what we call your level. And your name came out of the hat to play this other player. We won't name names. And you just went, "Oh, sorry, love." That's what I remember. And I remember, I think it was Nick Taylor who told me that story. He said, this is where I don't know if you even meant that as a mind game, but before
no,
you
not at all.
No, it would have just been that confidence that you had, and that, well, if you're that other player, you've lost, haven't you, the night before you've even started the match? Tell me in your words that was true.
So my memory of it was, it was after a knee injury, and there was no pegged rankings or whatever back then. So I've been out, and I think I've gone from literally number 1 or 2 in the world, whatever I was, down to about 50 something or other. Yeah. So I've had to come back, and I've ended up in qualifying. And you're right, it was Southport Open. I did about 3 tournaments in the US. Sort of through
Small
Connecticut
ones.
and small. It was where I had to start, and it was Connecticut. There was about 2 or 3 through Connecticut type area, and one of them is I've come in and I'm in qualifying, and I just remember thinking, well, people aren't going to want to play me, and I can't remember who it was, but literally what you said is correct. They looked at me and went, "Oh, God," one of those. So I'm like, "Oh, sorry, love." Someone had to get me. And whoever it was, I
remember who it was, but I don't think we should say.
Well, and depending on the scenario situation of whether we're talking in the qualifying or later on in the event, but I remember in one of them, I was going to run into Senga McPhee.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So Senga, the night before we played, and this was something like a quarter or a semi-final, So I think I've gone through, say, 2 rounds of qualifying, and then there was 4 rounds of the main draw. So it's come to about quarters or semi, and I've drawn Senga, who's worked her way through. The night before, when she knew she was playing me the next day, she booked her ticket home. And I somehow found that out, and I'm like, "Seng, what are you doing?" She's like, bloody hell, Fitz, I'm playing you. I'm going, I'm out of here. I'm going home." I'm like, "Seng, we haven't even played." She's like, "Fitz." I went, "Oh, okay, no worries." And I obviously went on to win the
Wow.
event.
Yeah.
But part of that was my previous ranking before my injury.
Yeah.
Kind of knew. They also probably knew just from watching me practice in the morning, I was back to playing okay, a decent level, that I wasn't carrying an injury or anything anymore. But yeah, I'm curious as to who it is that you're saying.
I'm sure it's not too offensive, but I remember it being Shelley Kitchen.
Oh, I can't remember that.
That's what Nick told me. We can always cut this bit if we want to get it out.
I don't remember that. I distinctly remember the bit about Senga, and because it made me laugh. But if something similar happened with Shelley, then I'm sorry, Shelley.
I mean, this is so interesting.
Senga was a really tough opponent to play as well. Maybe not for you at that time, but mentally there was a lot going on there. She was still playing quite a lot. I remember her having an absolute humdinger with Jenny Dunkoff really early. We went as a group of English, like 18, 19-year-olds, and she drew Senga, and it was because she used to get really mad with herself, didn't she? And kind of all sorts of antics, and whacking herself on the head with the racket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was difficult to play, but she was very good.
Let me tell you a story about Senga. She was certainly one of those players, extremely talented, could have done more. She came out to Australia and trained, and without a word of a lie, we were just hitting at a local club outside of Melbourne, and we were just having a hit. I can't recall if I beat her. This is practice, but it was one of the hardest games I'd played in a really long time. She was so good. When it came to a match, she just didn't seem to put it together. But in training at that time, she was unbelievable. So good. And I wished for her she could have done more because she was that good, but just didn't do it in tournaments.
Yeah.
I think a combination of fun got in the way, her temper got in the way, the expense of trying to become a professional player got in the way, just things like that.
I see. And Fitzy, like from your perspective, there are some players, to your point, that are extremely talented, extremely good in practice, but they can't get their head into that competitive fighting spirit, get stuck in, etc. Have you seen that kind of through your career with other players? Like, what is it that kind of, how can people overcome that? And did you ever have that block at any point?
I think probably everyone goes through different stages, and I think I can say this out loud, and I know Laura knows this player, but Isabelle Stoer is another player who is extremely talented and I think could have done more. So she was from France. Liz Irving, dear friend of mine, she should have won more than she did. Really talented player. So look, I think, and that's from the women's perspective. There's obviously plenty on the men, and you see, Jonathan Power won stuff, but I think he could have won more. And it's a combination of, is it in the head or is it a fitness thing? Mm-hmm. It's a tough thing to say. There's a bunch of players like that, and you get, Nick Matthew and Peter Nicol, who are solid, hard workers, fit as anything, and they won everything. They were amazing. David Palmer, another one. And you get some extremely talented players that come along and they win one or two things, and they just don't seem to be able to keep the momentum going. And whether that's a physical thing, an injury thing, a mental thing, not for me to say. Yeah, and at times you just think if they managed to get it all together, oh my word, there'd be some amazing results and players out there.
It almost feels a little bit like a game style thing as well, just based on the players that you mentioned. If you think of Peter Nicol or compared to, say, Jonathan Power was always a little bit more flashy with his style of play. There was a little bit more happening with what he was trying to do with his racket and the ball, whereas Peter was generally just, steady, gritty, consistent. It was replicable. There wasn't that much variation day to day. And, similar mindset with Nick Matthews, similar approach, similar with David Palmer. But some of the less consistent players probably tried to do a little bit more, which meant that you had to be on a little bit more. Otherwise, if you got it wrong, you were really out of sorts. So I wonder, but it's interesting because everyone's personality brings a different character and characteristic into play, which it's probably hard for someone like Jonathan to just go in and lock the court down the way Peter did or David did. It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, totally. And look, you get people with extreme talent and it's almost like it comes too easy to them. They get bored or something. So, they have to be, everything has to be right at that moment. And when it is, oh my word, no one can beat them. They'll win the World Championship 3 love. But, through next tournament, they can't piece it all together or whatever's going on in their head. And, the other players who are steady and consistent will come through. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just different. And if we were all exactly the same, probably wouldn't be that interesting.
Exactly. I think one of the players there, or a couple of players, both Egyptian, that stick out on the women's side particularly were Raneem El Walili. I always thought maybe, considering we were a really similar era as well, I played her a lot. That she had the talent to win more than she did, with the skill that she had. Noor El Tayeb as well. It was almost like they just didn't quite realize the damage that their basic game did to players without the stuff that was on top. So it's really tough, isn't it? And I don't know, I would be interested to know what your opinion is of it, whether, working with players now and juniors coming up, is it something that you can teach? Do you think it's something that you can teach, that mental side? Or even when you were saying earlier in the podcast about the gameplay side, being able to notice straight away if you're an amateur or a junior or even a pro, for example, how do you develop that got you where you've noticed a shot has just gone out of their reach? Is that something that I can imagine if you're brought up at Ponty, that's something that comes really easily? I mean, I used to go and do the odd session with Malcolm Wilstrop and my head would just blow. I'm like, I do not know what he's asking me to do. It would be 4 players on a court, one's playing below the line, one's playing above the line, one's playing straight and one playing cross court. And I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing here, let alone what I'm supposed to be following from the player in front of me and behind me. But I tell you what, doesn't it half kind of get that brain going rather than going there a little bit? So is it that? What do you think it is from your experience?
A lot of it's natural instinct, though, of reading the game.
That's the boring answer.
I know, but that's how it was for me. And look, I certainly wasn't a flamboyant go for a nick.
No.
I could play them. Geez, if you and I stood there and you flipped it up to me and I'd play a volley nick, I could hit that thing 9 times out of 10 or whatever, being reasonable, not full on flat nicks. But I could play the thing, but it wasn't there for me because if someone hit the ball up to me, it's like 33% chance straight out winner, 33% chance it's in the tin, and 33% chance it's just okay or average, and they're going to pick it up. And then the rally goes on. So I'm like, what's the point? I'd rather stick to playing it to length and then working the rally for a few more shots longer to win. This is where the Egyptians are so amazing, but, I come from old school and my personality is probably, a bit more straight down the line, I guess.
So you think that gameplay style is more natural, that kind of realising someone's rocking back off the tee, realising they've missed the volley, realising that they're not reading a certain shot and you going, I can play that shot 16 times in this match and you're not going to read it once. That's kind of just natural, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know what it's like. You have peripheral vision. You know and can feel your opponent is either on your back right-hand side or your back left-hand side. So you know when you get it completely wrong and you haven't read where they are and you've hit it straight back to them, you know you've stuffed it up massively. But, you know, your instincts will kick in and you feel the court, you feel the rally, you feel the tempo, and then eventually you feel where their head's at, or their fitness is gone, or their eyes have got wider, which has told you there's fear or something, and you feel and you can see that, and you got to piece it all together. But learning the mental strength part, a lot of that's even natural to a person. It's pretty hard to instill in someone fight to the death. That comes pretty naturally, I think, as well. And I've always had, for me, a saying, it's the difference between knowing and believing. And I knew for a long time I had an ability to win stuff. It wasn't till I really believed it deep down that I could do it, that I did. That's when I started. I always knew I could because everyone told me I was talented. I should have been this. I should have won that. I was the better player.
Yeah.
Didn't have this true sort of fight to the death because I was sort of a nice girl on court. And then eventually I got to a point of I am pissed off with losing and I'm sick of losing people I know I can beat. And suddenly this little fire lit in my gut. And I really believed it. And then it became, for me, if I play to the best of my ability, the result will come. And that result was a win. So I learned how to go, oh, God, I have to win. I have to win. Oh, I think I can win. I should win this match. I'm higher ranked. I'm the better player, to I am going to win. Or I didn't even say it as I'm going to win. I will play to the best of my ability. You come after me, Laura, and you have to play better than me today to win. Yeah. And that's just how I treated it in the end. That's why I had certainly my best results towards the end of my career.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know if you can instill the mental stuff. I think there's a lot of it's got to come from within. It's either you're born with it. There are ways to learn certain parts of it, but probably not all of it.
I think some of it as well is like intellectual as well. You know, how switched on are you? People think sometimes that sports people in general are not as intelligent, let's say, as some people who go into other areas of life. And I think the players that I've worked with, the intelligent ones that are willing to learn, are willing to read, are willing to listen, are willing to actually realize, who is that other person who's talking in my head? Is it me? Is it somebody else? Is it when are those two voices going to come together that you can start to go, I was very much like you at the end of my career, the amount of people that would just say, you were so mentally strong, you are mentally strong, you ice queen persona, you never gave anything away, love all nine, all in the fifth, no one would know. I mean, it's all like, obviously it's rubbish. What was going on in my mind was anything but those thoughts. But I think what you learn as you get a little bit more experienced is, I'm not going to let that happen again. I don't want that to happen again. And I'm going to go on there with that attitude. Exactly. I used to have a very similar one of, I'm going to go on there, I'm going to play the best that I can play. And if they're better on the day, I will shake your hand and go, well done. But I'm not going to go on and lose because I've not played my absolute best. You're going to have to beat me. And I think that when you're playing those players who are better than you, you have to believe, don't you, that you can actually go on and play your best, and you're not having them sneaky thoughts of, I'm about to get a win, I'm playing really well, this could be my day, oh my gosh, well, I'm about to do it, because then it just blows up in your face. So it's really interesting.
Your best thoughts are no thoughts. I found if there was no one talking, that's when I played my best squash, because I was just playing and it was all natural instinct coming. And the moment any voice came in, whether that's mine or I heard someone out there, that's when I'd get interrupted.
Interesting.
So I found I played my best squash when I was it was like a blank. I was just instinct and, what is it, in the zone or whatever they say. It was that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I know, obviously, as a player who obviously never reached the same level of accolades as you folks did, uh, I've had to teach myself a lot of these things over time. And I think some of the pieces, like Laura, what you were mentioning of, can you feel the opponent drifting back? And Fitzy, you mentioned, once you play the shot and the person's standing right there, and you've mucked it up. Like, one of the things that I teach my students now, and as I still seek to improve my game, is there's this hindsight piece. So as soon as you execute something, you have a data point, you have some information instantly about, is this person hanging back? Are they pushing up? Are they hanging to the right? Are they hanging to the left? You have an idea of what's happening, and then you're almost kind of collecting some of this data as you go to understand what that person's doing. And then I think just asking questions, like, some of it is we don't know what we don't know, right? So when some of what you've spoken about, if someone has never thought of that 3/4 pace cross court that you just spoke about, that's past the volley, that's past the width, and that fades in the back, they don't even know that that's a shot that they can attempt to hit. So I think part of it as well is, to your point, Laura, continuing to educate yourself and understand, hey, this is within the realm of possibilities. Here's another option that you could consider. Here's another way to try to break down your opponent. And then I think that piece of awareness in the moment, and almost being a blank slate, to your point, Fitzy, like you're just there, you're locked in, you're in the moment. I think that when you kind of get all those pieces together, I feel that that's sort of the ideal scenario for learning. But it's difficult sometimes to get, especially juniors, to start thinking that way and to lock in to that extent and to be that present and that aware in the moment. For me, it's only coming now as I'm in my late 30s, like in my mid 30s. It's like I was really starting to figure it out. So yeah, it's a tough thing to teach people.
Yeah.
But for you, where it comes from instinct is actually really fascinating that
Yeah.
you figured this stuff out on your own. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say in my whole career, I could probably name only this many times I felt in the perfect zone in my head. So out of, I don't know, call it hundreds of matches, I could probably name this many where it was just nailed it 100%. And there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. And how do you find it every time? Sometimes you don't, but you work through it. It's because it's years of dedication and practicing that same movement or shot over and over.
Yes.
I mean, I'd argue as well that without realizing it as a kid, and I see it now a little bit with Leo, and I think back to my own childhood. I'm obviously listening to what you said about your childhood. I think playing multiple sports helps with that peripheral vision, with that gameplay, with seeing balls come in at different angles, catching, throwing, different footwork. I see it now with Leo, even at 3, he's doing ballet just because it happens to work with our timings and there's a class at the club. He's doing tennis, he's doing swimming. And I see already at 3 years old how his body is like, he's understanding his body. He lifts this arm up and he lifts the opposite leg, and he lifts this arm up and the opposite leg. Now, if you're a kid and you've played no sport or very little other sports and you've just gone all in squash, I mean, I think there was a clip I saw of Mohammed Shabagi trying to hit a golf shot. I mean, no one wants to see that again. So it's stuff like, I mean, obviously he's one of the greatest players to have gone, so it's worked. But when you talk about these kids who are maybe not quite as naturally talented, I think that gameplay stuff, that playing the boys, the Pontefract style, all of that can really, really help. But just one last question from me. I think we've tried for most of the guests that we've had on to ask them about their coaching philosophy and fundamentals. So I know you obviously did a bit of work with Nicole. I know you worked with Deepika for a while as well.
He was another one that should have done a bit more too.
Yeah.
Could have been better.
Yeah. I think just so working on your coaching, transitioning out of playing as well, and what are your coaching fundamentals if you were to take a player on now? Is there a certain thing that you're like, you must technically do this movement, you must do this, shoulders, wrist? We had Rodney Martin, we've had DP, we've had a couple of top class coaches on. How does that look like for you if you were to have a player now?
I think when I first started doing any coaching, I was a bit more into the technique and how it needed to maybe I don't know, certain things needed to be right in my head. But Mike Way ended up getting me to think about things differently. Is every player, so long as their swing eventually passes through this box, so it doesn't matter if you sort of start slightly closed or a bit open, but once the swing comes down and passes through, if your timing and the way the racket face is on the ball and basically the timing and everything about it, you'll get a great shot. So, you look at James Willstrop, Lee Beachall, they always had a slightly closed grip compared to a lot of others. You get other people that put their finger up the racket. I used to hold mine really low. There are so many variables. So once upon a time, I used to think everyone needed to look a bit more technically perfect.
Yeah.
Blimey, you look at everyone, they're all so completely different. So no, if someone came to me now, I think I'd be trying to let a lot of their what comes naturally to them come through. And so long as they have those fundamentals correct, as in, probably slight, open racket face, so long as they're coming down and coming through the ball in the right position, the racket face in the right position. And then of course, just the timing and body movement. I think they could do anything. There's some kid on tour now double-handed again, a bit like Peter Marshall. I mean, whoever thought Marshall would end up number 2 in the world?
We've got an English player who's switching hands as well. Young
yeah, I think I've seen that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, who's to say, what's right and what's wrong? And I think everyone's body shape is different. Their height is different. They're right-handed, left-handed. Some are long legs, some are whatever. Like your name, long legs. Yeah, that's a long time ago. But, everyone's so different. So not everyone's technique can be exactly the same. And I think if it was, we'd all be boring. So no, I'd probably let any player now, I'd work with a lot of what they had naturally and you just build on it from there. Because, I mean, Ramia Shaw was so different to half the Egyptians now as well. I mean, who's to say?
Yeah. What about on the movement side? Because I remember you giving me some good tips on the movement. Anything, was it just pattern drilling that you believed in? And
I did a lot of ghosting later on in my career. I didn't really I think I naturally used my left leg rather than my right leg on certain things, but I can see the left leg is being really used a lot on that, if you're right-handed, on the left wall. And I would have moved my right leg across more.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not coaching anymore, so I don't think about it that hard. But for me, I always found, and I was taught, if I put my right leg out while reaching for a backhand on that left wall, I'd obviously get a lot better shoulder turn.
Yeah.
But that's not the case anymore. So I don't know. Who's to say what's right and what's wrong these days?
Mm.
I'd still, for me, naturally, I'd still put my right leg out. But I used to use my left leg if it was the quickest option to get to a shot and hit a shot.
Yeah.
I just don't know whether I would teach it.
That's true.
That is what's being taught now. It's being pushed for the players to learn that. And I guess probably it helps with, keeping body balance, as in, you're not overworking your right hip compared to your left hip. And there's a lot more keeping the body balanced in a physical sense, sense.
Yeah, I have maybe one last question because I was very intrigued by some of the tactical discussion that you were having earlier, and going back to the point that a lot of people, like, we don't know what we don't know. So you said that you really liked that 3/4 pace cross court, and your tactics went back to volleying a lot, hitting deep, severe hitting, keep the person under pressure, use that straight kill as a high percentage attacking option, almost like a drop to Laura's point, because it stays so short. What were some other sort of tactics or favorite shots? You mentioned the boast as well. Like, were there specific thoughts that you had? So people listening that if they want to learn to play like Fitzy, what can they try to emulate? How would you think about structuring rallies?
Well, look, I knew my backhand was by far my strongest side, and I loved it, everything about the backhand. And it didn't matter where you put me on that left wall, I was completely comfortable and happy, and I'd see it as a strength. So anytime we'd have a rally, I would work out how to get it over to that left wall. And then I would just pound the corners and obviously keep it as tight as I could. Then eventually my opponents feeling the pressure and they'd lift to get it out of there or hit it cross court. And I remember the staff of England squash, they would always say, someone made a comment to me about keeping it off my forehand volley in the middle of the court because that's where I won a lot of points. And I just looked at them really with a smirk on my face and I'm like, yeah, it is where I'm winning the points, but it started because of the backhand side. That wasn't the winner. It started over here. So I just smiled and I'm like, yeah, whatever, keep going. Keep telling your players, keep it off my forehand because then they were keeping it on my backhand. And find out what your strength is, really understand what your strength is and use it and work the rally to use it. So all I ever did really was work the hell out of that left wall and wait for the opening for that. And then I was comfortable on forehand, don't get me wrong. And then I'd work that corner. And every time I forced them to boast, then I just went drop shot. And if they started to work out that's what I was going to do, then I'd hit the 3/4 pace because they're coming in for the drop and I'd lift it up and over and stick them back in that corner. So tactics in squash, to a degree, I know this sounds funny, but they're quite simple. You pound the wall. The moment you create an angle, you're making a bigger angle for your opponent to make a bigger angle. So reduce the angles. And this is what I find fascinating about the way the Egyptians play. They create angles so quickly. And if you can reduce them playing those angles, you know, that's got to be a tactic. Reduce them creating angles.
I would say that it's a simple tactic when you're as good as you are. and your ball control is as good and you're so clear on your super strengths. And I think that's probably the goal that everyone can get to. I think if you're, you know, top 5, top 4 in the world, maybe now, at any time in any era, you're pretty clear on what your tactics are and you pretty much are putting your tactics onto your opponent probably 90% of the time, unless you are playing another top 4 in the world. So if you're playing Michelle Martin, she's going to have her way, isn't she, for at least a period of that match where you're not going to be able to have it your way. And then then the mental battle comes in of who can get it for longer and all of that stuff. So I think what I liked about that was the simplicity when you're talking to juniors and when you're talking to amateurs. I talk about it in a brand way. What is your brand? You know, you've got sort of 2 brands like a Ben and Jerry's or a Haagen-Dazs. They're both ice creams, but they're very different in how they come across with the way they portray themselves, the market they're aiming to do, whatever. Like, get your brand right. Who are you when you step on that court? What's your brand? What are you bringing to the table? And I think that if you can do that, you're a bit more clear on the tactics, start to kind of unravel for themselves based around your brand, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's just it. Find out what your strengths are and use them, and then make sure you can back it up with all the other parts of the court as well. I mean, nothing worse than you've only got a backhand and nothing else. You know, you've got to be able to back it up consistently with everything else, and hence why I worked on my drop shot and, you know, the front half of the court. But I mean, I can only base it on stories of my matches. I remember playing Linda Charman one time, or Linda Elriani now, and she was ranked maybe even 2 in the world at the time, I think, maybe 4. But and I just made a decision that I'd hit everything straight, and any time she was behind me, I would go short. If we were just you know, if the game was even and we're circling in the back, I'd just keep circling in the back with her. If she hit it up and I could feel it was coming onto my volley, but I could feel her just beside me or behind me, I'd hit length. I didn't go short until I could feel she was way back, or I forced her to boast or forced a weak shot. And then after a game and she started to read that, then when I could tell she was going to come forward, I'd just hit it back. And the amount of points I won were phenomenal because you'd lull them into a rhythm, a pattern, and then you break the pattern and it would mess their head up. And
that's amazing, yeah.
And this is what you sort of made some comment to me on a text message, Laura, about I won matches, 9-love or 9-1 in the second, third, fourth game, whatever. And it was like I remember playing Carol Owens one time, and our first game was really hard. And the moment she guessed where the ball was going and she guessed wrong, I went, gotcha. If she guessed right, she would be really hard in her head. She still would have been tough. But I got her. And then just after that, I just stuck to those basic rules. Length, wait till I could feel she had to play something like a boast or had to lift it. Then I'd go short. Then the moment she starts reading the short stuff, I just went back. And then in the end, she didn't know where it was going. And so I won point after point because she was getting frustrated. And then her head's gone. And that's the easy part. Once the head goes, the head goes.
Yeah, I know. I love all that. I love the psychological battles and the thinking. The one thing I'm just taking from it is how alive the brain is all the time. There's an aliveness to the brain, and I just don't think that we're seeing that. I think we do at the top level. I think you've got the top four, maybe the top 4 or 5 in the men as well. And I think they're adapting, they're thinking, they're changing, they're trying to mix it up, they're trying different things. I said unlucky to Joel Makin after that Asal match at the PSA Hall of Fame dinner, and he went, got to try something different, haven't you? And there was all sorts of uproar about that, how he'd played that match with Asal and the behaviour and what was going on. And I went, absolutely. I just went, I loved that. I loved the way you played. Whether you were very close to I never said this to him, but whether he was very close to the line or not, he's gone on there and he's gone, I've got beat the last 5 times. I'm going to try something different. The brain's working. DP always used to say that. Nigel Willis, you'll remember him, always used to say that. The brain working, got to get the cogs going. And just don't see people realising that people are in certain positions and deliberately just popping it up and over the head. Like, play the game. It's a game. It isn't just hit to the back. You know what I mean? There's a gameplay element to it. So it's so fascinating to hear you talk about that. I love it.
And for me anyway, I can only base it on my experiences. There's the 2 things, which is I wasn't thinking. If someone's in there talking, then it's too much information. I needed to just I just needed to play. And then my instincts would kick in. And the moment I win a rally in a particular way, without even overthinking it, it's like, that worked. And it would just come again and then come again. And then I'd work to try and find that same rally or position again. And then the moment they read it, then the instinct kicks in, change. But I was not having full on conversations. And some people do, some don't. Mine was just this sort of blank. And it would just be play and instinct. So this is where everyone's different. Some people need to have full on conversations. For me, I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, this is fantastic. I usually try to teach my students to use maybe some short cue words in those scenarios where if they recognize something, then the cue would be, to your point, show short, go long, or something like that from certain positions once they've picked up on the cues. And obviously, I'm sure when you were training, everything was drilled so much that you knew that, I can execute this, I know this, I can hit this drive. And then you kind of, that confidence and that repeatability comes out when you're playing in the match. And then it's more a piece of hyper awareness, but without overthinking it, hyper awareness. Oh, this is great. Well, Laura, I mean, I thought this has been fantastic. Fitzy, I think this is great. We really appreciate your time. We're in 3 different time zones, and we know it's very, very late for you. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome, and thank you for having me. And I'm sure there's heaps of stuff we could keep talking about as well. But that was fun, and it was good to just sit and reminisce and think of few things through. And sorry to the players that I mentioned, and hope it's okay.
I think it's all in good spirits, so I'm sure
No,
that you will.
absolutely, because they are all and have been fantastic players, and without them, you don't get to world number one, and you don't have the experiences without them. So, yeah, it's been a brilliant journey, put it that way.
Thank you. Well, we may have to pick your brain again if you enjoyed the reminiscing.
Thanks for listening to Between the Lines, where world-class insight fuels the squash journey that never ends. If today's episode helped you grow, please share it with someone in your squash circle and join our community online. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and stay in the rally.